The warning lights turned red across the bridge of the Eternal Convergence. Admiral Keth Mora stood tall, her blue-scaled hands gripping the command rail as alarms filled the air. The flagship of the Galactic Coalition had never failed before. It was impossible. The ship was perfect. "Report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. Commander Zixval rushed to her side, his forearms moving quickly over his tablet. "Admiral, the quantum crystalline core is showing impossible readings. The energy patterns make no sense." Keth Mora frowned. The Eternal Convergence was the pride of Zephyrian engineering. Her people had spent 300 years building it. Every crystal in the core had been grown in perfect conditions. Every quantum pathway had been tested 1,000 times. Nothing could go wrong. "Show me," she said. The main screen lit up with images from deep inside the ship. The quantum crystalline core stretched across 50 levels, a beautiful structure of glowing crystals and energy fields. It looked like a frozen waterfall made of light. But something was wrong. Dark lines ran through the crystals like cracks in ice. "The fractures appeared 12 minutes ago," Zixval explained. "They started small, but they are growing." Keth Mora studied the screen. The cracks did not look normal. They seemed to twist and bend in ways that hurt her eyes to follow. "Have you contacted the engineering teams?" "Yes, Admiral. Chief Engineer Knox Prime is already working on it. But she says she has never seen anything like this." The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss. Chief Engineer Knox Prime walked in, her silver skin pale with worry. Behind her came Dr. Vel Thanos, the ship's head scientist. "Admiral," Knox Prime said, "we have a serious problem. The core fractures are not following any known laws of physics." "Explain," Keth Mora ordered. Dr. Vel Thanos stepped forward. His large eyes blinked slowly as he spoke. "The cracks in the quantum crystals exist in multiple dimensions at once. Our instruments show them in places where they cannot be. It is like looking at a shadow that exists without an object to cast it." Keth Mora felt cold. "Can you fix it?" "We are trying, Admiral. But our repair methods require understanding the problem first. These fractures should not exist. They violate the basic rules of quantum mechanics." The Admiral looked at the screen again. The dark lines through the beautiful crystals seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "How long until the core fails completely?" "Unknown," Knox Prime admitted. "The fractures are spreading, but not in any pattern we can predict. It could be hours or days. And if the core fails, the ship will lose all power. Life support will run on emergency batteries for maybe 2 days. After that..." Knox Prime did not need to finish. Keth Mora nodded grimly. The Eternal Convergence carried more than just crew. In the diplomatic quarters, representatives from 12 different worlds were meeting to discuss peace treaties. Wars had been fought for decades over mineral rights in the outer sectors. These talks were the first real chance for peace in a generation. "Send word to the Coalition Council," she ordered. "Tell them about our situation, and contact every engineering team in the fleet. I want our best minds working on this problem." Over the next few hours, experts arrived from across the Coalition. The Axioms sent their greatest mathematicians, beings who could calculate quantum probabilities in their heads. The Vortanians brought their energy manipulation specialists, creatures who could see power flows like humans see colors. The Christek Union provided their molecular engineers, masters of crystal growth and structure. They all studied the quantum crystalline core. They ran tests and calculations. They built computer models and ran simulations. The answer was always the same. "Impossible," declared Axiom 7, the chief mathematician. "The fractures exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. This breaks the fundamental laws of space and time." "The energy patterns make no sense," added Vortanian Master Fluxweaver. "The power flows loop back on themselves in ways that should create infinite feedback loops. Yet somehow the system remains stable." Christek Engineer Prime Growth examined the crystal structure itself. The molecular bonds are intact, but the quantum states are chaotic. It is like seeing a building where every floor exists on a different planet, yet people can still walk between them. Admiral Keith Mora listened to report after report. The greatest minds in the coalition all said the same thing. The damage could not be repaired because it could not exist in the first place. Meanwhile, time was running out. The diplomatic talks continued in the conference rooms, but news of the ship's problems was starting to spread. Some delegates were talking about leaving. The peace negotiations that had taken years to arrange were falling apart. Admiral, Commander, Zixval approached her station. Chief Medical Officer Yil Hexa is reporting strange symptoms among the crew near the core levels. What kind of symptoms? Headaches, dizziness, difficulty focusing. She says it might be related to the quantum instabilities. Keth Mora closed her eyes. The situation was getting worse by the hour. How many affected? 30 crew members so far. Chief Yil Hexa has moved them to the upper levels, but the effects seem to be spreading. The Admiral looked around the bridge. Her crew worked at their stations, but she could see the tension in their movements. Everyone knew the ship was in trouble. Everyone knew that the greatest engineers in the galaxy had no answers. Admiral, Nox Prime called from the engineering station. The fractures have spread to Section 7 of the core. We are losing efficiency in the power grid. Keth Mora walked to the engineering console. The display showed the quantum crystalline core in 3 dimensions, but even that simple view made her head hurt. The dark cracks seemed to move when she was not looking directly at them. Chief Engineer, in your professional opinion, can this be fixed? Nox Prime was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, I have worked with quantum crystals for 200 years. I helped design the original core systems. I have never seen anything like this. The damage seems to exist outside our understanding of reality itself. That is not an answer, Chief. Then no, Admiral. I do not believe it can be fixed, not by any method known to coalition science. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of computers and the distant alarm that had been sounding for hours. Keth Mora looked at the faces of her crew. They trusted her to find a solution. The diplomatic teams trusted her to keep them safe. The coalition trusted her to protect their most advanced ship. But the greatest minds in the galaxy had no answers. Sir, Communications Officer Fendara spoke up from her station. I am receiving a message from the Cultural Exchange Quarters. Put it through. The screen changed to show a small communication room. A human woman sat at the table, her dark hair pulled back and her brown eyes serious. Admiral Keth Mora recognized her as Dr. Sarah Chen, part of the human engineering team aboard for the Cultural Exchange Program. Admiral, Dr. Chen said, I understand you are having some technical difficulties with your power core. My team would like to offer our assistance. Several bridge officers made quiet sounds of surprise. The humans were the newest members of the coalition, barely 2 centuries since first contact. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. They still used chemical rockets for some of their space travel. Dr. Chen, Admiral Keth Mora replied carefully, I appreciate the offer. However, our top engineers from across the coalition are already working on the problem. I understand, Admiral, but sometimes a fresh perspective can help. We humans have a saying, when you are stuck in a hole, stop digging. Maybe it is time to try a different approach. Chief Engineer Nox Prime stepped forward. Admiral, with respect to Dr. Chen, this is a quantum crystalline system of extraordinary complexity. The humans use mostly mechanical and electrical technologies. They have no experience with quantum engineering at this level. Dr. Chen smiled. That is true, Chief Engineer. We are pretty new to all this quantum stuff. But we are pretty good at fixing things that are broken. And from what I hear, you have something that is very broken. Admiral Keth Mora considered the offer. The coalition experts had been working for hours with no progress. The fractures were spreading, and crew members were getting sick. The diplomatic mission was falling apart. What did they have to lose? Dr. Chen, what exactly are you proposing? Let my team take a look at your core. We will not interfere with the work your engineers are doing. We just want to see the problem for ourselves. Maybe we will think of something your people have not tried. The core is extremely dangerous right now, Nox Prime warned. The quantum instabilities could be harmful to biological systems. We understand the risks, Dr. Chen replied. but we would like to help if we can. Admiral Keth Mora looked around. The bridge. Her officers waited for her decision. Through the viewports, she could see the stars that seemed so much farther away now that their ship was crippled. Very well, Dr. Chen. You and your team may examine the core, but you will work under Chief Engineer Knox Prime's supervision, and you will follow all safety protocols. Thank you, Admiral. We will do our best. The communication ended, and the bridge returned to its tense quiet. Commander Zixval moved closer, to the Admiral's chair. Sir, do you really think the humans can help? Their engineering methods are so basic. Admiral Keth Mora watched the display showing the impossible fractures in their perfect core. The greatest minds in the coalition had declared the problem unsolvable. Perhaps it was time to try something basic. Commander, right now basic might be exactly what we need. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the corridor outside the engineering section, checking her equipment one more time. Her team was small compared to the massive coalition engineering crews. Just 4 humans. Herself, Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez, Systems Specialist Janet Park, and Materials Expert David Kim. Everyone ready? She asked. Marcus nodded, adjusting his tool belt. As ready as we can be for impossible physics. Remember, Sarah said, we are here to observe first. Do not touch anything without permission, and keep your minds open. Sometimes, the answer is simpler than it looks. The engineering section doors opened to reveal Chief Engineer Knox Prime waiting for them. Her silver skin reflected the bright lights, and her expression was polite but doubtful. Dr. Chen, welcome to engineering. I must warn you again that what you are about to see may be disturbing. Even our most experienced engineers have difficulty processing the visual data from the core. We understand, Sarah replied. Can you show us the damage? Knox Prime led them through several levels of engineering decks. They passed Zephyrian engineers working at control stations, their blue-scaled hands moving over holographic displays. Axiom mathematicians stood in groups, their large heads pulsing with bioluminescent calculations. Vortanian energy specialists floated near power conduits, their gaseous forms shifting between colors as they analyzed energy flows. Impressive team, David Kim whispered. The best in the coalition, Knox Prime confirmed. Every specialist here has decades of experience with quantum systems. They reached the core viewing chamber, a large room with transparent aluminum windows looking into the heart of the ship. Sarah stepped forward and immediately understood why the other engineers looked disturbed. The quantum crystalline core was beautiful and wrong at the same time. Towers of crystal stretched up through multiple levels, glowing with soft blue light. Energy fields danced between them like aurora in slow motion, but the dark fractures running through everything made her eyes water to follow them. Oh, Janet Park said softly. That is not right. The cracks seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Sarah would look at one section and see the fracture running vertically. Then she would blink and the same crack was horizontal, or diagonal, or somehow all 3 at the same time. How long have you been studying this? Marcus asked. 8 hours, replied Axiom 7, floating over to join them. We have run every test we know. The damage violates basic laws of physics. What tests have you tried? Sarah asked. Knox Prime activated a holographic display. Quantum resonance scans, dimensional stability analysis, temporal flux measurements, molecular bond inspection, energy pattern mapping, and mathematical probability modeling. Sarah nodded, but she was not really listening to the technical details. Instead, she was watching the cracks themselves. There was something about the way they moved. Dr. Chen? Knox Prime said. Did you understand the test results? Sorry, what? The test results. They show that the fractures exist in impossible quantum states. Right. Sarah kept watching the core. Can you show us what happened when the damage first appeared? Vortanian Master Fluxweaver drifted closer, his energy, form shifting to a pale yellow. The fractures appeared suddenly during a routine power adjustment. One moment the core was perfect, the next moment this. What kind of power adjustment? We were increasing output by 0.03% to compensate for some minor energy loss in the port engines. Marcus frowned. You were changing the power level when this happened? A very small adjustment, Christech Engineer Prime Growth explained. Well within normal operating parameters. We have made such adjustments thousands of times. Sarah walked along the viewing window studying the core from different angles. The fractures looked different from each position, but they also looked somehow familiar. Janet, she called. Come look at this. What does this pattern remind you of? Janet joined her at the window. She studied the cracks for several minutes, tilting her head from side to side. You know, it looks almost like stress fractures. That is impossible, Nox Prime said. Quantum crystals do not develop stress fractures like mechanical materials. But what if they do? David Kim spoke up. What if these crystals can get stressed in ways your tests do not measure? Axiom 7's head pulsed brighter. The crystals exist in perfectly controlled quantum states. There is no mechanism for stress. Maybe, Sarah said slowly. But what if the stress is not in the crystals themselves? What if it is in the space around them? I do not understand, Nox Prime replied. Sarah moved to another window. The fractures seemed to pulse slightly like a slow heartbeat. You said this happened during a power adjustment, right? What if the adjustment created some kind of tension in the quantum field, like stretching a rubber band too far? Quantum fields do not work that way, protested Christech Engineer Prime Growth. Maybe they do not work that way for you, Marcus said. But what if they work that way for the crystals? The Coalition engineers looked confused. Vortanian Master Flux Weaver shifted to a deep blue color. I do not comprehend your meaning. Sarah tried to think of a way to explain. Look, I am not an expert on quantum mechanics, but I know something about fixing things. And when I look at this core, I do not see impossible physics. I see something that is broken and trying to hold itself together. The mathematics clearly show, began Axiom 7. Forget the mathematics for a minute, Sarah interrupted. Just look at it. Really, look at it. What do you see? The engineers stared at the core. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, Janet spoke up. It looks like it is in pain. Nox Prime turned to her. Pain? It is a machine. It cannot feel pain. No, but it can be damaged in a way that affects its function. Look at how the energy flows around the fractures. It is like the system is trying to route power around the damaged areas. David nodded. Like blood flow around a clot, or like a broken bone that still has to carry weight, Marcus added. The Coalition engineers exchanged glances. Sarah could tell they thought the humans were being too simplistic. Dr. Chen, Nox Prime said carefully, while your observations are creative, they do not address the fundamental problem. These fractures exist in quantum states that our science says are impossible, but they exist anyway, Sarah pointed out. So maybe your science is missing something. Our science is based on millions of years of research across dozens of species, Axiom 7 said, his bioluminescence flashing with what looked like irritation. And yet here we are, Marcus said, gesturing at the broken core. Sarah walked back to the central viewing position. The fractures seemed to pulse a little faster now, as if responding to the discussion. Can I ask you something? She said. When you designed this core, what did you want it to do? Generate power efficiently and safely, Nox Prime replied. And how did you make sure it would do that? By controlling every variable. Perfect crystal growth, precise quantum alignment, exact energy distribution patterns. So you made it perfect. Yes. Sarah nodded. What happens when something perfect encounters? Something imperfect I do not understand. Well, perfect systems are designed to work under perfect conditions. But what happens when conditions are not perfect? When there is a small problem or an unexpected event? Christech Engineer Prime Growth moved closer to the window. Perfect systems are designed to handle variations within acceptable parameters. But what if the variation is outside those parameters? Then the system fails safely, Vortanian Master Flux Weaver said. Does this look like a safe failure to you? Marcus asked, pointing at the writhing cracks of impossible light. The coalition engineers were quiet. Sarah studied the core again. The pattern was definitely familiar now. You know what this reminds me of? A guitar string. A musical instrument? Nox Prime asked. Yeah. When you tune a guitar, you adjust the tension on each string. Too loose, and it sounds flat. Too tight, and it sounds sharp. But if you tighten it too much, the string breaks, Janet finished. Exactly. But sometimes, if you are lucky, the string does not break cleanly. Sometimes it develops little cracks and keeps trying to hold tension. It makes weird sounds, but it still works partially. David was nodding. And if you are really unlucky, the string breaks in multiple places at once. But the pieces are still connected enough to vibrate. That would create very complex harmonic patterns, Marcus added. The humans looked at each other. They were all thinking the same thing. What if, Sarah said slowly, your quantum crystals are like guitar strings, and your power adjustment pulled them too tight? Quantum crystals do not have tension, Axiom 7 said firmly. But quantum fields do have tension, Janet said. I remember reading about quantum field theory. Fields can be stretched and compressed. In theory, yes, but what if it is not just theory? Sarah interrupted. What if your crystals are sitting in quantum fields that got stretched too far and started to crack? Even if that were possible, Nox Prime said. How would you fix it? Sarah smiled. Same way you fix a broken guitar string. You either replace it or you find a way to relieve the tension. And if you cannot replace it, then you get creative. Marcus was already digging in his toolkit. You know what? I think we need to see this core up close. Absolutely not, Nox Prime said quickly. The radiation levels near the core are extremely dangerous. How dangerous? David asked. Potentially fatal to most biological species. But not necessarily fatal. Well, no, but the risk is something we are willing to take, Sarah said. If we are right about this, we might be able to help. If we are wrong, we will find out quickly. Nox Prime looked around at her fellow engineers. They all looked doubtful, but also desperate. Their perfect solution was not working. I will need to check with Admiral Keth Mora, she said finally. Of course, but while you do that, can we borrow some of your tools? We want to run a few tests of our own. What kind of tests? Sarah grinned. The kind that do not require understanding impossible physics. Admiral Keith Mora stood in the engineering section, watching the human team prepare their equipment. She had given permission for them to work directly with the core, despite Chief Engineer Nox Prime's concerns. The situation was desperate enough to try anything. Are you certain about this, Dr. Chen? The Admiral asked. Sarah Chen looked up from her tablet. No, Admiral. We are not certain about anything, but we have some ideas that might work. That is not very reassuring. Sometimes certainty is overrated, Marcus Rodriguez said, checking his tools. The certain solutions have not worked so far. Admiral Keth Mora watched as the humans prepared to enter the core chamber. Their equipment looked primitive compared to coalition technology. Marcus carried a toolbox that appeared to be made of simple metal. Janet Park had what looked like modified electronic devices. David Kim was carrying a bag full of various materials and chemicals. What exactly is your plan? Nox Prime asked. First, we want to get close to the core and see how it feels, Sarah explained. Feels? Yeah. Sometimes you can diagnose problems by touch that you cannot find with instruments. Temperature, vibration, even texture can tell you what is wrong. Axiom 7 floated nearby, his bioluminescent head pulsing rapidly. The core operates at quantum scales. Physical sensation cannot provide meaningful data at that level. Maybe not, Janet said, but it can tell us about the effects at our level, and those effects might give us clues about what is happening at the quantum level. Sarah put on a modified environmental suit. It was clearly human-made with thick padding and multiple layers of protection. Ready, Marcus? Let's do this. The core chamber doors opened and the humans entered. Through the viewing windows, the coalition engineers watched nervously. The quantum fractures seemed more active now, pulsing with irregular light. The radiation levels are increasing, Vortanian Master Fluxweaver reported, his gaseous form shifting to a worried orange color. Dr. Chen, please be careful, Admiral Kethmora said over the communication system. We will, Admiral. Sarah and Marcus approached the nearest crystal tower. It rose 30 meters above them, glowing with soft blue light. The dark fractures running through it seemed to writhe like living things. Okay, Sarah said. Let's start with basics. Marcus, put your hand near the crystal. Not touching, just close. Marcus held his gloved hand a few centimeters from the crystal surface. It feels warm. And there is a vibration, like a low humming. Normal or abnormal humming? Definitely abnormal. It feels unsteady, like an engine that is not running smoothly. Sarah moved to another crystal tower. This one feels different, cooler, and the vibration is faster. Through the communication system, they could hear Nox Prime talking to her staff. They are detecting temperature and vibration differences between crystal towers. Our instruments show all towers operating within normal parameters. But their instruments show something ours do not, Admiral Kethmora replied. Let them continue. David Kim entered the chamber carrying his bag of materials. Sarah, I brought some test substances. Want to try the resonance experiment? Good idea. David pulled out what looked like a simple metal tuning fork. He struck it against a piece of metal, creating a clear ringing sound. The sound echoed through the chamber and something unexpected happened. The quantum fractures pulsed in rhythm with the sound waves. Did you see that? Janet exclaimed from the viewing chamber. The fractures are responding to audio frequencies, Christech engineer Prime Growth said, sounding amazed. But that should be impossible. Quantum states do not interact with sound waves. Sarah was already pulling out more tuning forks. David, try different frequencies. They tested fork after fork. Each frequency created a different response in the fractures. Some made them pulse faster, others made them slow down. A few frequencies seemed to make the fractures smaller. This is fascinating, Axiom 7 admitted. The quantum damage is responding to mechanical vibrations. Our mathematical models did not predict this interaction. Marcus was examining the base of one crystal tower. Sarah, come look at this. The mounting system looks weird. Sarah knelt beside him. The crystal was held in place by a complex arrangement of quantum field generators and mechanical supports, but something was wrong with the alignment. It looks like the crystal has shifted slightly in its mount, she observed. That is impossible, Nox Prime said through the communicator. The mounting systems are designed to hold the crystals in perfect alignment. Well, this one is not perfectly aligned, Marcus replied. Look at the gap on the left side. It is bigger than the gap on the right side. Janet was studying the readouts from her modified instruments. I am picking up stress patterns in the mounting hardware. Some of these supports are carrying more load than others. Physical stress should not affect quantum systems, Vortanian Master Fluxweaver insisted. But what if quantum systems can affect physical stress? Sarah asked. What if the quantum fractures are putting mechanical strain on the mounting system? David was still experimenting with sound frequencies. Guys, you need to hear this. I found a frequency that makes the fractures almost disappear. He struck a specific tuning fork, and the dark cracks in the crystal became much fainter. The pulsing slowed to an almost normal rhythm. How is this possible? Nox Prime whispered. Sarah was thinking hard. The pieces were starting to fit together, but in a way that defied everything she knew about advanced technology. What if the quantum fractures are like cracks in glass? And what if sound waves can make those cracks vibrate in ways that either make them worse or better? Quantum crystals are not glass, Axiom 7 protested. No, but maybe they behave like glass under certain conditions. Marcus was examining more of the mounting systems. Sarah, I think I see the problem. Look at this. He pointed to the base of another crystal tower. The mounting hardware showed clear signs of mechanical stress. Metal components were slightly bent. Support brackets had small cracks. The mounts are failing, Sarah realized. The quantum fractures are putting physical stress on the mounting systems, which creates more quantum instability, which creates more fractures. A feedback loop, Janet added. Each problem makes the other problem worse. But how do we fix it? Admiral Kethmora asked. Sarah looked around the chamber. Dozens of crystal towers stretched up through multiple levels. Each one was held by mounting systems that were failing under impossible stress from quantum fractures that should not exist. We need to stabilize the mounts and calm the fractures at the same time, she said. With what? Nox Prime asked. Sarah grinned. With whatever works. Marcus was already opening his toolbox. You thinking what I think you are thinking? Probably. David, keep experimenting with those frequencies. Find the one that works best. Janet, start mapping the stress patterns in all the mounts. I want to know which ones are failing worst. What are you planning to do? Admiral Kethmora demanded. We are going to fix this thing the human way, Marcus said, pulling out a roll of silver tape. Is that a duct tape? Nox Prime asked in disbelief. Industrial-grade reinforcement tape, Sarah corrected. But yeah, basically duct tape. You cannot fix a quantum crystalline core with duct tape. Watch us, Marcus replied. Sarah was studying the mounting system more closely. These supports are designed to hold the crystals in perfect position, right? But what if perfect position is not what the crystals need right now? The crystals must maintain precise quantum alignment, Christech engineer Prime Growth insisted. But the fractures have already broken that alignment. Maybe we need to let the crystals find a new position that works with the fractures instead of fighting against them. Marcus nodded. Like setting a broken bone. You do not force it back to the original position if that is going to cause more damage. You set it in a position where it can heal. Quantum crystals do not heal. Axiom 7 said. Maybe they do not heal the way you think they should heal, Janet replied. But that does not mean they cannot adapt. David had found the optimal frequency. When he struck the tuning fork, the fractures became so faint they were almost invisible. This frequency definitely helps, but I cannot keep striking a tuning fork forever. No, Sarah said. But we can create a device that generates this frequency continuously. She pulled out her tablet and started sketching. Marcus, look at this. If we modify one of the ship's sound systems to generate David's frequency, we can create a harmonic field that stabilizes the fractures. That might work, Marcus agreed. But we will also need to fix the mounting systems. Right. We cannot just tape them back together. We need to let them find their natural position under the new stress patterns. Sarah looked up at the crystal towers stretching above them. The fractures were still pulsing, but they seemed slightly calmer now that David was regularly striking the tuning fork. Okay, here is what we are going to do. We are going to loosen the mounting systems just enough to let the crystals shift into positions that work with the fractures. Then we are going to reinforce the mounts with additional supports. And we are going to create a harmonic stabilization system that keeps the fractures calm. That is insane, Nox Prime said. Probably, Sarah agreed. But insane might be exactly what this situation needs. Marcus was examining the nearest mounting system. I can do this, but I will need to work on each crystal individually, and I will need materials that can handle both quantum fields and mechanical stress. What kind of materials? Marcus grinned and held up his roll of tape. The kind that humans have been using to fix impossible things for centuries. Admiral Keith Mora watched through the viewing window as the humans began their impossible repair. They were going to fix the most advanced machine in the galaxy with tape, sound waves, and what they called common sense. It should not work. It violated every principle of proper engineering. But the greatest minds in the coalition had already tried every proper solution and nothing had worked. Maybe it was time for something improper. The repair work began immediately. Sarah Chen stood in the core chamber, watching Marcus Rodriguez carefully loosen the mounting clamps on the first crystal tower. The massive structure, 30 meters tall and glowing with quantum energy, shifted slightly as the supports released their perfect grip. Readings are changing, Janet Park called from her monitoring station. The stress patterns are redistributing. Through the viewing windows, the Coalition engineers watched with growing amazement and horror. Nox Prime kept checking her instruments, unable to believe what she was seeing. The quantum alignment is shifting, she reported to Admiral Keth Mora. This should cause cascading system failures. But instead, something else was happening. As Marcus allowed the crystal to find its own position, the fractures running through it began to change. They were still there, but they looked less chaotic. The dark lines seemed to settle into more stable patterns. "It's working," David Kim said, striking his tuning fork again. The sound waves rippled through the chamber, and the fractures pulsed in harmony with the frequency. The cracks are responding to the new positioning. Sarah was taking detailed notes on her tablet. "Marcus, try loosening the supports on Tower 7. That one has the worst stress patterns." Marcus moved to the indicated crystal. This tower was leaning slightly, held in place by mounting hardware that was clearly under too much strain. As he loosened the clamps, the crystal shifted noticeably. "Careful," Admiral Keth Mora warned through the communicator. "It's okay, Admiral," Marcus replied. "I can feel the tension releasing. The crystal wants to move into this position." "Crystals do not want anything," Axiom 7 protested. "They are inanimate objects." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but the forces acting on them definitely want to go in certain directions. We are just letting physics do what physics wants to do." As the crystal settled into its new position, the fractures throughout that tower began to calm. The wild pulsing slowed to a steadier rhythm. The dark lines became less twisted and more orderly. Janet was recording everything. The energy flow patterns are improving. Power efficiency in this section has increased by 12%. "Impossible," Christech engineer Prime Growth muttered. "Actually," Sarah said, "it makes perfect sense. When you force a damaged system to work in ways that fight against the damage, you waste energy fighting the damage. But if you let the system adapt to work with the damage, it can actually become more efficient." David had been experimenting with different sound frequencies. "I think I can build a permanent harmonic generator using parts from the ship's entertainment system. The speakers in the recreation deck have the right frequency range." "Do it," Sarah said. "But first, let's see how many towers we can stabilize manually." The work continued for hours. Marcus moved from tower to tower, carefully adjusting each mounting system. Some crystals needed to shift only slightly. Others required major repositioning. Each adjustment was guided by Janet's stress analysis and David's frequency testing. The Coalition engineers watched in fascination. Their instruments showed impossible readings. Quantum alignment was shifting constantly, but instead of causing system failures, the changes seemed to improve overall stability. "I do not understand what I am seeing," Vortanian Master Fluxweaver admitted, his gaseous form shifting between colors as he tried to process the data. "The humans are not following any known engineering principles," Nox Prime said. "They are just making it up as they go along." "And yet it is working," Admiral Keth Mora observed. After 6 hours of work, Marcus had adjusted the mounting systems on 15 crystal towers. The core chamber looked different now. Instead of perfectly aligned columns of crystal, the towers leaned at various angles. Some were tilted, others were rotated. A few had shifted position entirely. It looked messy and unplanned. It violated every principle of precise engineering, and it was working better than the original design. "Power efficiency is up 18% overall," Janet reported. "Quantum stability has improved in every section we have modified." Sarah was exhausted but excited. "Okay, now for the permanent harmonic stabilizer. David, what do you need?" "I need access to the ship's audio systems, some basic electronic components, and about 4 hours to build the frequency generator." "You have it," Admiral Keth Mora said. "Whatever you need." David left the core chamber to work on his project. Marcus continued adjusting crystal mounts. Janet kept monitoring the stress patterns and energy flows. Sarah coordinated everything while taking detailed notes. "Dr. Chen," Nox Prime called from the viewing chamber. May I ask you something? Of course. How did you know this would work? Your approach violates every principle of quantum engineering. Sarah paused in her work. Honestly, I didn't know it would work. But I knew that trying to fix the fractures by ignoring them wasn't working. So we decided to work with the fractures, instead of against them. But how did you develop this approach? Did humans encounter similar problems before? Sarah laughed. Chief Engineer, humans have been dealing with broken things that still need to work for thousands of years. We have learned that sometimes the best fix is not the perfect fix. Sometimes, the best fix is the one that works. Marcus looked up from the crystal mount he was adjusting. When I was a kid, my family had an old car. The engine made a weird noise, and we took it to mechanics for months. They kept trying to make it run quietly like a new car. Finally, my dad took it to his friend Jake, who listened to the engine and said, "This engine wants to make that noise. Let's figure out how to make it run well while making that noise." Jake adjusted a few things, and the car ran great for 10 more years. Still made the noise, but it ran great. You are treating our quantum crystalline core like an old car? Nox Prime asked. Pretty much, Sarah said, except with more radiation and impossible physics. By the 12th hour, David had returned with his harmonic generator. It looked like a collection of speakers, electronic devices, and control systems, all connected with cables and, yes, quite a bit of duct tape. It's not pretty, he admitted, but it should work. The device was installed near the center of the core chamber. When David activated it, a barely audible humming filled the air. Immediately, the quantum fractures throughout the entire core began to pulse in unison. Frequency lock achieved, Janet announced. All fractures are synchronizing with the harmonic field. The effect was dramatic. The chaotic, writhing cracks that had terrified coalition engineers for hours began to settle into stable patterns. They were still there, but they no longer looked wild and dangerous. They looked organized. It's like they're dancing, Marcus observed. They are finding their natural resonance, Sarah explained. Instead of fighting against the quantum field, the fractures are working with it. Admiral Kethmora had been watching for 16 hours straight. Dr. Chen, what is the status of the core? Power output is stable and 22% above. Original specifications, Janet reported. All quantum systems are operating within acceptable parameters. The fractures are present but stable. Are we safe to resume normal operations? Sarah looked around the core chamber. The crystal towers stood at odd angles, held in place by reinforced mounting systems that included generous amounts of human-made tape and improvised supports. The harmonic generator hummed constantly, keeping the fractures in sync. It looked like nothing any coalition engineer would have designed. Yes, Admiral. The core is safe and functional. It doesn't look like what you expected, but it works. How long will these repairs last? Hard to say, Marcus admitted. We have stabilized the immediate problem, but this is still a complex system. We should monitor it closely and be ready to make adjustments. What kind of adjustments? Sarah grinned. The kind we just made. Sometimes the best maintenance is not about keeping everything perfect. Sometimes it is about helping the system adapt when perfection is not possible anymore. Chief Engineer Nox Prime entered the core chamber for the first time since the repairs began. She walked slowly between the tilted crystal towers, studying the improvised mounting systems and the jury-rigged harmonic generator. This is not how we designed it, she said finally. No, Sarah agreed, but it is how it needed to be. The fractures are still there. Yes, but they are working with the system instead of against it. Nox Prime touched one of the reinforced mounts where human tape had been used to add extra support to failing hardware. Will this tape hold under quantum field stress? Marcus joined her. That tape has held together human spacecraft, underwater equipment, and emergency repairs in conditions from Arctic cold to desert heat. It has never failed us yet. But this is quantum crystalline technology, the most advanced engineering in the galaxy. And now it is quantum crystalline technology that works, Sarah pointed out. Sometimes advanced technology needs simple solutions. Admiral Kethmora's voice came through the communicators. All teams prepare for power system tests. We are going to verify full operational capability. Over the next several hours, the Eternal Convergence underwent complete systems testing. Every ship function was checked. Every power grid was verified. Every backup system was confirmed operational. The results were extraordinary. Not only was the ship functional, but it was performing better than ever. Power efficiency was up across all systems. Response times had improved. Even systems that had not been directly affected by the core problems were working more smoothly. How is this possible? Christech engineer Prime Growth asked during the final briefing. The improved core efficiency has benefits throughout the ship, Janet explained. When your power source works better, everything works better. But the core is damaged, Axiom 7 insisted. The fractures are still present. The fractures are part of the system now, Sarah replied. We did not fix them. We made them work for us, instead of against us. Admiral Keth Mora looked around, the briefing room at her mixed crew of coalition engineers and human repair specialists. Dr. Chen, I have one final question. Could this repair method be applied to other systems? Other ships? Sarah considered the question carefully. Maybe. But every system is different. Every problem is different. What worked here might not work somewhere else. Then how do we learn from this? You learn the same way humans have always learned, Marcus said. You try things, you see what works, you adapt when it doesn't work, and you remember that sometimes the best solution is not the obvious one. Admiral Keth Mora nodded slowly. Chief Engineer Knox Prime, I want you to work with Dr. Chen's team to document everything they did. I want this repair method studied and understood. Yes, Admiral. And Dr. Chen? Yes, Admiral? Would you and your team consider staying aboard permanently? It seems we have much to learn from human engineering methods. Sarah looked at her teammates. Marcus was grinning. Janet was nodding enthusiastically. David was already sketching ideas for improving other ship systems. We would be honored, Admiral. As the briefing ended, Admiral Keth Mora remained behind to speak with Sarah privately. Dr. Chen, may I ask you something personal? Of course. When you first saw our broken core, were you afraid? Sarah thought about the question. No, Admiral. I was excited. Excited? Yes. We had been invited aboard the most advanced ship in the galaxy to observe coalition technology. But observing is passive. When your core broke, we finally had a chance to participate, to contribute, to show that humans might have something valuable to offer the coalition. And did you have something valuable to offer? Sarah smiled. I guess that is for you to decide, Admiral. But I think we proved something important today. What is that? That sometimes the newest ideas work better than the oldest wisdom, and that the best way to solve impossible problems is to stop believing they are impossible. Admiral Keth Mora looked through the viewing port at her ship's core, where crystal towers stood at impossible angles, held together by tape and ingenuity, humming with the frequency of human determination. Perhaps, she said, it is time for the coalition to learn some new engineering principles. 3 weeks after the impossible repair, Admiral Keth Mora stood on the bridge of the Eternal Convergence, reviewing the ship's performance reports. The numbers were remarkable. Power efficiency had stabilized at 28% above original specifications. System response times had improved across every department. Even the coffee makers were working better. Admiral, Commander Zixval approached with his daily report. The diplomatic teams have completed their peace negotiations. All 12 worlds have signed the treaty. Excellent news, Commander. They are attributing much of their success to what they are calling the convergence miracle. Apparently, news of our repair has spread throughout the negotiating teams. Several delegates mentioned that if former enemies could work together to accomplish the impossible, then perhaps their worlds could do the same. Admiral Keth Mora nodded. The human repair had done more than fix the ship. It had become a symbol of cooperation across different approaches and philosophies. Sir, Communications Officer Fendara called from her station. Incoming message from Coalition Command. Priority Alpha. Put it through. The main screen activated to show Fleet Admiral Yarkoth, the Coalition's highest-ranking officer, His four-armed Zephyrian form filled the screen, and his expression was serious. Admiral Keth Mora, congratulations on the successful completion of your diplomatic mission. Thank you, Fleet Admiral. However, I am calling about a different matter. We have been analyzing the reports of your core repair. Some of our top engineers are skeptical of the methods described. Admiral Keth Mora had expected this. What specific concerns do they have, sir? Chief Engineer Vex Thorin of the Science Council claims that the repair methods violate fundamental principles of quantum engineering. He says it is impossible for the reported improvements to be real. The improvements are documented and verified, Fleet Admiral. Yes, but Vex Thorin believes the measurements must be in error. He is requesting permission to inspect your ship and correct what he calls dangerous improvisation. Admiral Keth Mora felt her scales tighten with irritation. Fleet Admiral, my ship is operating at peak efficiency. My crew is safe. The diplomatic mission was successful. Why would we change anything? Because, Admiral, if word spreads that coalition ships can be repaired with, what was it, duct tape and sound waves, it could undermine confidence in our entire engineering establishment. Before Admiral Keth Mora could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lights flashed red and her bridge crew sprang into action. Report, she commanded. Emergency signal from the coalition vessel Storm of Thought, Communications Officer Fendara announced. They are experiencing critical system failures and requesting immediate assistance. Where are they? 2 hours away at maximum speed. Admiral, they report that their quantum crystalline core is developing the same type of fractures we experienced. Fleet Admiral Yarkoth's expression changed immediately. Admiral Keth Mora, proceed to assist the Storm of Thought. We will discuss the inspection later. The communication ended and Admiral Keith Mora turned to her crew. Commander Zixval, set course for the Storm of Thought maximum speed. Yes, Admiral. And contact Dr. Chen's team. Tell them we may need their services again. 2 hours later, the Eternal Convergence arrived at the location of the disabled coalition vessel. The Storm of Thought was a heavy cruiser, smaller than the flagship but still carrying over 1,000 crew members. Dr. Chen, please report to the bridge, Admiral Keth Mora announced. Sarah Chen arrived within minutes, followed by Marcus Rodriguez, Janet Park, and David Kim. They had become permanent members of the crew, working with coalition engineers to study and document their repair methods. What's the situation, Admiral? Sarah asked. The Storm of Thought is experiencing quantum crystalline core failures identical to what we experienced. Their chief engineer reports that the fractures appeared suddenly and are spreading rapidly. Are they trying to fix it the same way we did? No. Their chief engineer, Nex Torval, is following standard coalition repair protocols, the same ones that failed on our ship. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. How long do they have? Unknown. But their power levels are dropping steadily. Admiral, Marcus said, we should go over there and help. I was hoping you would say that. Within an hour, the human team had transferred to the Storm of Thought. They were met by Chief Engineer Nex Torval, a tall axiom with a skeptical expression. So, you are the humans who supposedly fixed the impossible, he said. I have read the reports, I do not believe them. That's okay, Sarah replied. You don't have to believe them. You just have to let us work. I will not allow unproven methods to be used on my ship. Chief Engineer, Admiral Keth Mora's voice came through the communicator from the Eternal Convergence. You are ordered to cooperate fully with the human team. But Admiral, Nex Torval, your ship is dying. Standard methods have failed. Try something different. The core chamber of the Storm of Thought looked exactly like the Eternal Convergence had looked weeks ago. Perfect crystal towers stood in precise alignment, but dark fractures writhed through them like living shadows. The quantum damage was spreading faster than it had on the flagship. Same problem, Marcus observed. But worse, the fractures are more extensive, Janet agreed, studying her instruments. And the mounting systems are under even more stress. David was already testing sound frequencies. The resonance patterns are different too, This core has a lower base frequency than the convergence. Sarah walked around the chamber, studying the damage. Next, Torval. When did the fractures first appear? 18 hours ago, during a routine power calibration. Same trigger as our ship. What have you tried so far? Standard quantum realignment protocols, crystalline matrix stabilization, temporal flux compensation. And nothing has worked. The fractures continue to spread. Sarah nodded. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Same approach as before, but adapted for this specific core configuration. I will not allow you to damage our quantum alignment systems, next Torval protested. Chief Engineer, Marcus said patiently, your quantum alignment systems are already damaged. We're going to help them work with the damage instead of against it. The repair process began. Marcus started with the most severely damaged crystal tower, carefully loosening the mounting clamps to allow the crystal to find its natural position under the new stress conditions. The quantum alignment is shifting, next Torval reported, watching his instruments with growing alarm. Yes, it is, Sarah confirmed. That's what we want. As the crystal settled into its new position, the fractures running through it began to calm. The chaotic pulsing slowed to a more regular rhythm. Impossible, next Torval whispered. Chief Engineer, Janet said, would you like to see the stress analysis? Your mounting hardware was failing under loads it was never designed to handle. By allowing the crystals to shift position, we're redistributing those loads more evenly. Next Torval studied Janet's data. His large axiom eyes blinked rapidly as he processed the information. The stress patterns are indeed improving. But this violates all protocols. Sometimes protocols need to be updated, Sarah said. The work continued for 12 hours. Marcus adjusted mounting systems. Janet monitored stress patterns. David built another harmonic generator using parts from the ship's entertainment systems. Sarah coordinated everything while working directly with Next Torval to help him understand their methods. By the end of the repair, the Storm of Thought's core looked as unconventional as the eternal convergences. Crystal towers stood at various angles held by reinforced mounting systems that included liberal amounts of human engineering tape. The harmonic generator hummed steadily, keeping the quantum fractures synchronized. Power efficiency is up 31%, Janet reported. All systems operating within acceptable parameters, Marcus added. The fractures are stable and synchronized, David confirmed. Chief Engineer Nex Torval stared at his instruments in amazement. I do not understand how this works, but the readings are undeniable. The ship is performing better than it ever has. Understanding can come later, Sarah said. Right now, your ship and crew are safe. News of the second successful repair spread quickly through the coalition fleet. Within days, 3 more ships reported similar quantum crystalline core problems. Each time, human engineering teams were dispatched to implement the new repair methods. Each repair was different. Every ship had unique requirements, different stress patterns, different resonance frequencies, but the basic approach remained the same. Work with the damage instead of against it. Let the system adapt instead of forcing it back to original specifications, and use whatever methods actually worked instead of only the methods that looked proper. After the 5th successful repair, Fleet Admiral Yarkoth requested a meeting with Admiral Keth Mora and the human engineering team. Dr. Chen, the Fleet Admiral said, I must admit that I owe you an apology. When I first heard about your repair methods, I thought they were dangerous and unscientific. No apology needed, Fleet Admiral. Skepticism is healthy in engineering. Perhaps, but results are more important than theory. Your methods have saved 5 ships and over 6,000 crew members. We were just doing our job. No, Dr. Chen. You were doing something more than that. You were introducing a new way of thinking about engineering problems. Fleet Admiral Yarkoth activated a holographic display showing technical diagrams. The Science Council has been studying your methods. They want to establish new protocols based on your approach. What kind of protocols? Adaptive engineering standards. Instead of requiring perfect adherence to original specifications, the new protocols will allow for creative solutions that work with system damage rather than against it. Sarah looked at the diagrams. They showed formalized versions of the techniques her team had developed through trial and error. These look good, Fleet Admiral, but remember, every situation is different. You cannot just apply the same solution everywhere. Of course, that is why we want to establish human engineering teams on every major coalition vessel. Each team would be trained in adaptive engineering methods and authorized to implement creative solutions when standard methods fail. Marcus grinned. You want us to teach other people how to fix things with duct tape? If duct tape works, then yes. Admiral Keth Mora spoke up. Fleet Admiral, there is something else to consider. These repairs don't just fix the immediate problems. They seem to make the ships perform better overall. Yes, we have noticed that. Dr. Chen, do you have an explanation? Sarah thought carefully before answering. I think it's because we're not just fixing the broken parts, we're helping the whole system become more resilient. When you design something to work perfectly under perfect conditions, it can fail catastrophically when conditions aren't perfect. But when you design something to adapt and work with imperfections, it becomes stronger and more flexible. Like biological evolution, added Janet. Systems that can adapt survive better than systems that can only work under ideal conditions. Fleet Admiral Yarkoth nodded slowly. So you are suggesting that our engineering philosophy has been too focused on perfection? Not too focused, Sarah said diplomatically, but maybe too exclusively focused. Perfection is a great goal, but adaptability is a great survival trait. Dr. Chen, I have one final question. Your methods have been extraordinarily successful, but they look unconventional. Some of our engineers are concerned about maintaining professional standards. Sarah smiled. Fleet Admiral, in human engineering, we have a saying, if it looks stupid but it works, it isn't stupid. Professional standards are important, but they should be measured by results, not appearances. Even when the results are achieved with duct tape. Especially when the results are achieved with duct tape. 6 months later, Admiral Keth Mora received a report that made her proud. Human engineering teams were now assigned to over 50 coalition vessels. The new, adaptive engineering protocols had been implemented fleet-wide. No ship had experienced catastrophic quantum crystalline core failure since the new methods were introduced. More importantly, the human approach had begun to influence other areas of coalition technology. Scientists were experimenting with adaptive systems that could modify themselves based on changing conditions. Engineers were designing equipment that prioritized function over form. Even military strategists were studying human concepts like good enough solutions and working with what you have. The Eternal Convergence continued to operate at peak efficiency. Its unconventional core, with crystal towers held at odd angles by reinforced mounts and tape, had become a symbol of successful cooperation between different engineering philosophies. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the core chamber, watching the quantum fractures pulse in perfect synchronization with David's harmonic generator. The damage that had once threatened to destroy the ship was now an integral part of its operation. You know, Marcus said, joining her at the viewing window. When we first saw this core, I thought we were going to have to rebuild the whole thing. Instead, we helped it rebuild itself, Sarah replied. Think it will keep working? Sarah watched the steady pulse of the stabilized fractures. As long as we keep adapting with it. The moment we decide it's perfect and stop making adjustments, that's when we'll have problems again. So we'll never be done fixing it? Marcus and human engineering were never done fixing anything. That's what makes it interesting. Admiral, Keth Mora's voice came through the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the Admiral. We have just received orders for a new diplomatic mission to the frontier worlds. Departure in 6 hours. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other and grinned. Another mission meant new challenges, new problems to solve, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. In the end, the humans had given the coalition more than just a way to fix broken ships. They had given them a new philosophy, that perfection is not the enemy of good enough, that adaptation is stronger than rigidity, and that sometimes the most advanced solutions come from the most basic principles. The core hummed steadily, held together by quantum crystals, alien engineering, and human duct tape. It was not the perfect machine the Zephyrians had originally designed. It was something better. It was a machine that worked. After the fifth successful repair, Fleet Admiral Yarkoth requested a meeting with Admiral Keth Mora and the human engineering team. Dr. Chen, the Fleet Admiral said, "I must admit that I owe you an apology. When I first heard about your repair methods, I thought they were dangerous and unscientific. No apology needed, Fleet Admiral. Skepticism is healthy in engineering. Perhaps, but results are more important than theory. Your methods have saved 5 ships and over 6,000 crew members. We were just doing our job." "No, Dr. Chen. You were doing something more than that. You were introducing a new way of thinking about engineering problems." Fleet Admiral Yarkoth activated a holographic display showing technical diagrams. "The Science Council has been studying your methods. They want to establish new protocols based on your approach." "What kind of protocols?" "Adaptive engineering standards. Instead of requiring perfect adherence to original specifications, the new protocols will allow for creative solutions that work with system damage rather than against it." Sarah looked at the diagrams. They showed formalized versions of the techniques her team had developed through trial and error. "These look good, Fleet Admiral, but remember, every situation is different. You cannot just apply the same solution everywhere." "Of course. That is why we want to establish human engineering teams on every major coalition vessel. Each team would be trained in adaptive engineering methods and authorized to implement creative solutions when standard methods fail." Marcus grinned. "You want us to teach other people how to fix things with duct tape?" "If duct tape works, then yes." Admiral Keth Mora spoke up. "Fleet Admiral, there is something else to consider. These repairs don't just fix the immediate problems. They seem to make the ships perform better overall." "Yes, we have noticed that. Dr. Chen, do you have an explanation?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I think it's because we're not just fixing the broken parts, we're helping the whole system become more resilient. When you design something to work perfectly under perfect conditions, it can fail catastrophically when conditions aren't perfect. But when you design something to adapt and work with imperfections, it becomes stronger and more flexible." "Like biological evolution," added Janet. "Systems that can adapt survive better than systems that can only work under ideal conditions." Fleet Admiral Yarkoth nodded slowly. "So you are suggesting that our engineering philosophy has been too focused on perfection?" "Not too focused," Sarah said diplomatically, "but maybe too exclusively focused. Perfection is a great goal, but adaptability is a great survival trait." "Dr. Chen, I have one final question. Your methods have been extraordinarily successful, but they look unconventional. Some of our engineers are concerned about maintaining professional standards." Sarah smiled. "Fleet Admiral, in human engineering we have a saying, if it looks stupid but it works, it isn't stupid. Professional standards are important, but they should be measured by results, not appearances. Even when the results are achieved with duct tape. Especially when the results are achieved with duct tape." 6 months later, Admiral Keth Mora received a report that made her proud. Human engineering teams were now assigned to over 50 coalition vessels. The new, adaptive engineering protocols had been implemented fleet-wide. No ship had experienced catastrophic quantum crystalline core failure since the new methods were introduced. More importantly, the human approach had begun to influence other areas of coalition technology. Scientists were experimenting with adaptive systems that could modify themselves based on changing conditions. Engineers were designing equipment that prioritized function over form. Even military strategists were studying human concepts like good enough solutions and working with what you have. The Eternal Convergence continued to operate at peak efficiency. Its unconventional core, with crystal towers held at odd angles by reinforced mounts and tape, had become a symbol of successful cooperation between different engineering philosophies. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the core chamber, watching the quantum fractures pulse in perfect synchronization with David's harmonic generator. The damage that had once threatened to destroy the ship was now an integral part of its operation. "You know," Marcus said, joining her at the viewing window, When we first saw this core, I thought we were going to have to rebuild the whole thing. Instead, we helped it rebuild itself, Sarah replied. Think it will keep working? Sarah watched the steady pulse of the stabilized fractures. As long as we keep adapting with it. The moment we decide it's perfect and stop making adjustments, that's when we'll have problems again. So we'll never be done fixing it? Marcus and human engineering were never done fixing anything. That's what makes it interesting. Admiral, Keth Mora's voice came through the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the Admiral. We have just received orders for a new diplomatic mission to the frontier worlds. Departure in 6 hours. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other and grinned. Another mission meant new challenges, new problems to solve, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. In the end, the humans had given the Coalition more than just a way to fix broken ships. They had given them a new philosophy, that perfection is not the enemy of good enough, that adaptation is stronger than rigidity, and that sometimes the most advanced solutions come from the most basic principles. The core hummed steadily, held together by quantum crystals, alien engineering, and human duct tape. It was not the perfect machine the Zephyrians had originally designed. It was something better. It was a machine that worked.